arrived here yesterday, and my first task is to assure my dear sister of my welfare and increasing confidence in the success of my undertaking. Welcome to Bodybuilding with Victor Frankenstein. My name is Sophie Marie, and this is the podcast where I am trying to watch every single film adaptation of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. Before we begin, I want to give a shout out to the podcast Jane Ostentations, hosted by Jessica Law and Sasha Sienna, where I basically stole this concept from, except that they are watching Jane Austen films. This week's film is the 2015 Victor Frankenstein. Before we go on, I am going to give a few content warnings for specifically ableism, classism, death, animal mutilation, talk of religion, brief mention of sexual assault. So let's get into the film. In 1890s London, ambitious medical student Victor Frankenstein attends a circus performance where he helps save an injured aerialist named Lorelei. He does this with the aid of a nameless hunchback enslaved by the circus's ringleader, who harbors feelings for the girl. Impressed by the hunchback's vast knowledge of human anatomy acquired from stolen books, Victor rescues him, drains the cyst on his back that causes his physical abnormality, and gives him a harness to improve his posture. He then names him Igor Straussman after his roommate, who is not often home. The two then become partners in Victor's ongoing experiments to resurrect life through artificial means, incurring the wrath of the devoutly religious police inspector Roderick Turpin, who views their experiments as blasphemy. When Victor shows Igor his use of electricity to animate eyes, Igor suggests he made mistakes attaching the nerves, leading Victor to ask Igor to perform the surgical parts of his experiment. Victor procures parts from dead animals and makes Igor restore the organs, which Victor secretly uses to create a monstrous chimpanzee-like creature nicknamed Gordon. Igor later reunites with Lorelei, now masquerading as the mistress of a closeted gay baron, upsetting Victor, who views Lorelei as a distraction. Igor invites Lorelei to a demonstration of their experiment, which goes awry when Gordon the monkey escapes and wreaks havoc through the university before being killed by Victor and Igor. Lorelei is horrified by Victor's experiments and urges Igor to stop him from pursuing the matter further. But Igor is reluctant to do so upon learning that Victor is driven by the need to atone for his indirect role in the death of his older brother Henry, for which Victor's domineering father blames Victor. Victor is expelled from college for his unorthodox methods, but attracts the attention of his wealthy, arrogant classmate, Finnegan, who wants him to create an artificial humanoid creature. Victor and Igor outline a behemoth named Prometheus, but Igor's deepening relationship with Lorelei soon causes a rift between them. Turpin, the police officer from earlier, and his men raid Victor's laboratory, hell-bent on destroying his inventions. During the raid, Igor stumbles onto the corpse of the real Igor Straussman, dead from an overdose, and the source of the eyes Victor had used in his experiments. When he attacks Victor, Turpin loses a hand and is blinded in one eye. Victor and Igor escape in a carriage sent by Finnegan and are taken to the family's estate. Turpin is fired from Scotland Yard for having invaded Victor's home without a warrant. Finnegan provides the scientists with the necessary funds to build Prometheus and offers them laboratory facilities at his family's estate in Scotland. Igor is suspicious of Finnegan and outraged with Victor for his treatment of the original Igor. After a falling out, Victor departs for Scotland alone. Finnegan kidnaps and binds Igor, revealing his plans to kill Victor once Prometheus is complete and weaponize his creation. Igor is then thrown into the River Thames to drown, but manages to escape and reunites with Lorelei, who nurses him back to health. Igor and Lorelei embark to Finnegan's estate in order to rescue Victor. Igor finds Victor on the verge of using lightning to animate Prometheus. Victor ignores Igor's pleas and activates the machine. A power surge overloads the machinery, killing Finnegan. During the ensuing chaos, Turpin unexpectedly arrives, blaming and threatening Victor for his creation. Prometheus suddenly steps forward, and Victor is initially ecstatic that the experiment has worked, sharing a brief moment with Prometheus, thinking him to be his resurrected brother Henry. Victor quickly realizes that the experiment has failed. Prometheus has no consciousness and cannot talk. The shocked Turpin opens fire on Prometheus, who goes into a rage, killing Turpin and nearly killing Victor. Returning to his senses, Victor joins forces with Igor to kill Prometheus by stabbing its 2 hearts. After regaining consciousness the next morning, Igor reunites with Lorelei, who hands him a letter written to him by Victor, in which Victor apologizes for all the suffering he has caused, says he is allowed to live his life with Lorelei, informs him to be ready for when Victor may ask one day for his help again, and that Victor recognizes Igor as his greatest creation. Victor then retreats to the Scottish countryside in search of new discoveries. Okay, so that was a long synopsis. I'm going to give a few notes. The cast, Igor Straussman is played by Daniel Radcliffe. Victor Frankenstein is played by James McAvoy, and Roderick Turpin is played by Andrew Scott. The film was directed by McGowan, and the film was written by Max Landis. I earlier had mentioned that there would be a brief mention of sexual assault. I do just want to mention that Max Landis has been, I don't want to say outed, but there are accusations against him for sexual assault. I'm not going to go into that here, only specifically because this is about the film. So I just wanted to give you guys a heads up. Thank you. And back to the movie. Last week I talked about a film that I thought was a really problematic and horrible adaptation of Frankenstein. This is objectively worse. I promise you guys, the next episode will be a film that I actually really like. This one was not it. I wanted to start with saying that I had a lot of fun with beginning the film. It was very over the top and silly, but definitely not good. By the end, it was actually tedious, and I was kind of begging for it to be over. So I've broken down my issues with this film into a couple sections before we get on to rating it. The first section is the sort of serious issues that I have with the script and with its portrayal specifically. So I'm going to go down those really quickly. The first thing that I noticed right off the bat, literally from the first few minutes, is its overwhelmingly negative portrayal of poor people. First off, we see Igor in the circus. Everyone there is, first off, circuses have a very long history of treating their performers inhumanely. That's not gone into here. It's very much just seen that all of these carnival performers are dirty, they're uneducated, they're anti-science, they're sort of backwards, and they don't know what they're doing. That pretty much sticks through the film. We don't see a lot of other portrayals of poor people again, but every time that we do, it's that same kind of portrayal. Secondly, with Lorelei, who I will come back to, she is a useless part of the film, and I really hate that. But when we first meet her, she is a carnival performer like Igor, but miraculously, after her accident and Igor has had his social standing risen, so has Lorelei. She's living this life of a mistress, even though, she's luckily not actually having to have sex with this man. There's only one reference to him preferring the company of men, and that's it. That's the entire characterization of her benefactor. But what bothered me was the fact that they couldn't be together. Like, while they were in the circus, she had never really noticed him. But once they're both of a higher social standing, they both understand each other from having been in the circus together. But now they're worthy of each other. And that threw me for a loop. And that's never really talked about. Their past of being performers and being poor is really truly never brought up through the rest of the film. The second issue that I have that I think is actually quite as bad as its portrayal of poverty is its portrayal of disability. So we start with Igor, who we meet. He has hunchback. He's got a big lump on his back. He's walking bent over. And then the second scene that we have between he and Victor says after Victor has brought him back to his flat, they're sort of discussing why he's brought Igor back. Victor violently throws Igor up against a wall, rips his shirt off, stabs him with a tube, and tells him that he's not actually a hunchback. He has this cyst, and he very graphically drains it before throwing like this brace over Igor and pulling him up to stand straight. So first off, any consent or bodily autonomy that Igor could have had is just immediately stripped away. And his apparent disability is also violently stripped away. And then is he worthy of the intelligence that has already been canonically bestowed upon him? We already know by this point that he's very, very smart. He's self-taught. He's a self-taught doctor, basically. And from that point on, it's never brought up again that he lived his entire life thinking that he was a hunchback, living his life being viewed as a disabled man and being treated poorly because of his perceived disability. I think that the way that this is written really shows that in the view of the film, disability is something bad. It is something to be overcome. It is something holding people back. And I don't agree with that. There is very much, there's a lot of literature and study and activism that has happened for the last several decades that I think I will link some in the show notes just to really bring home that this is a really disgusting and outdated portrayal. And then later we come back to Turpin, the cop, who is maimed in this fight with Victor. He loses an eye, he loses his hand. Towards the end of the film, when he is fired from Scotland Yard, we see him as this kind of deformed monster of his own. He's lost his mind. All of the now able-bodied cops are seeing him as deranged, and he's obsessed. And the connection between his poor mental state and his new disabilities are very obvious coding of villainy. It's honestly some of the oldest villain coding I've ever seen. And it, again, never comes back up again. He's in like 2 more scenes where none of this has changed his character. He's just now overtly the bad guy. So we see that there's almost this transference. Igor starts out as poor and abused and possibly disabled, and he's pulled from that life. He's pulled from being poor. He's violently taken away from being quote unquote disabled, and he's suddenly worthy of Victor's attention, worthy of his new station, whereas Turpin starts out fully able-bodied and then is, attacked, loses body parts, and by that point has kind of fulfilled his journey into becoming the actual villain of the film. And that's honestly, those are really gross parallels, really gross and very harmful kind of ideas around. Maybe, I don't know if the film itself understands or is trying to say explicitly that disability is bad or connected with villainy, but that's exactly what it is saying. That is the coding of the text. And I really wanted to bring that out first and foremost, because I think it's just honestly the most harmful aspect of this film. Moving on, I just want to point out, we do have another villain, which is Finnegan. He's not really a character. He's just a hoity-toity guy who's very rich and wants to steal this monster. There's really no reason given other than power. He's also high-key queer-coded. I'm not really going to go into him super in depth because he's not actually a character. He is just an evil queer rich man. And I feel like that kind of speaks for itself. My last sort of serious issue with the script has more to do with the source material than those first few things did. Because, little known fact, Igor, not a character in the novel, has nothing to do with the novel. He was a character created for the James Whale 1931 film. And he was played by, oh my goodness, why am I forgetting his name? I am looking, Dwight Fry. Oof, that hurt me. I love Dwight Fry. So my last sort of serious issue with the script is actually about the way that it codes Victor. So I think I mentioned this in the last episode that Victor in the book is 100% in the wrong. All of his decisions lead to his loved one's downfall, lead to death and harm. His behavior also leads to harm against the monster. He's just not good. He's not a great guy. And there are a lot of moments in the novel where he is coded and as, not, how do I say this? He's not coded as a villain, but he's definitely morally incorrect. And the text itself lets you know that he is incorrect, even though he is the narrator and he doesn't see himself as being the bad guy. He sees himself as a tragic hero or as a man who's just overtaken by hubris. This film is wild in the way that it portrays Victor and Igor. Both of them are inexplicably geniuses who just have a more understanding of life and anatomy and natural sciences than anyone else. No one else can really see what they see. Victor himself is definitely seen as flawed. There's one scene where it's very clear that he is manipulating Igor, and you're not supposed to, or at least I don't think you're supposed to agree with Victor in that moment. But because it's mostly from Igor's point of view, not all the time, but a large chunk of it is, he doesn't really question Victor's morals. He just questions Victor's reasoning. He doesn't think, oh, Victor's a bad person, or he's a prideful person, or he's a person who's doing something that is, objectively harmful. He just thinks that he is doing it because he's misguided. And that's frustrating. But late, like at the very end, when he's going off to do other experiments and he tells Igor that he is his greatest creation, it's yet again telling you that, yeah, he was misguided, he was a bit eccentric, but what comes next for him will probably be something great. And Igor will get his happy ending for now until later when Victor comes back into his life and they have more shenanigans. On the other end, Lorelai questions their experiments. She thinks that they're obscene and kind of gross. And she has her mind changed in this very short amount of time at a dinner party. Whereas Turpin, who's also not a character in the book, he is purely of the screenwriter's imagination. He is overtly religious, and there's this whole debate scene about playing God, but he is 100% seen as being in the wrong. He is persecuting Victor because of his outdated religious beliefs. It's the same reason that Lorelai initially has issues with the experiments. But he's seen as being completely backwards. His mind can't be changed. And then later he's transformed into the big bad villain. Moving on to what I have in my notes called my lesser issues. First and foremost, Lorelai serves no purpose. Elizabeth in the original novel doesn't serve a huge amount of purpose other than grounding for Victor and being sort of his moral compass. and also being a tragic woman for him to mourn. She's not much of a character in the novel, but she does serve some plot points. Lorelai, other than that, is strictly just to give Daniel Radcliffe a pretty lady to get smoochy with. And that's it. That's really it. She doesn't do much of anything. There's actually one scene where she serves any kind of purpose to the plot, and it is skipped over very quickly. And that's when they are trying to get into Finnegan's estate and there are guards. She pretends to be lost while Igor sneaks in the back. And that's it. That's like the one time that she has anything to do with the actual plot, other than creating tension between Victor and Igor, where I personally think that the tension should be coming from their disagreements about how the experiments are being run or why the experiments are being run. There's also one scene that I think is really weird. She's in the hospital after she falls in the first moments of the film, and Igor, after his transformation, goes to visit her. He tells the nurse that she's not being cared for properly, tells the nurse how to care for her properly, and then he just leaves. While there's like 20 other sick patients in this room that he doesn't even look at. It's a weird, I don't want to call it an incel moment, but there's this moment of like, I'm only going to try and use my expertise to save this woman that I'm hoping to have sex with. And then he does get to have sex with her. While there's all these other people who are seen as, you know, they're not actually characters. They're not people. They're just laying in this sick bed. It's just a weird scene that to me, again, I think is there to highlight how Igor is inherently a good person. But I don't really think that he is. He's just a person who does good things to get what he wants. Hot take of the day. My next issue is the entire subplot of Turpin's criminal investigation. I don't understand. Basically what happens is in the first scenes, after Lorelai's accident at the circus, when Victor and Igor are, setting her bones back, trying to get her to the hospital, there is an altercation when Victor tries to take Igor back with him, and they end up killing a man who shoots at them first, obviously. And so there is a murder investigation happening. The murder basically just gets forgotten after the first couple of scenes, and it just turns into Turpin having a vendetta against these scientists, these mad scientists who are going against God. So that's what the whole sort of crime investigation is. It has nothing to do with the actual murder and everything to do with the crime of resurrecting dead bodies. I really think that this subplot, to me, was proof to me that the screenwriter and the filmmakers knew kind of what themes they were trying to get across, but they didn't know how, and so they fell into this very formulaic, almost tropey storytelling method with sort of like a crime procedural that wasn't actually a procedural because, there's no procedures happening. It's just Turpin kind of staring at a board being angry and then harassing Victor. So yeah, that subplot just, it bothers me. It's very cliched. Andrew Scott is giving it his all. His most famous role is as Moriarty in Sherlock. He's a great actor. I just think that he's misused in this film. The next sort of issue I have is with the monster design. Such a pinnacle moment of the film. So earlier, when we meet Gordon, the corpse monkey, he looks like he could be a physical prop. He's decaying, he's gross. When he's resurrected, he's very obviously CGI, but he doesn't lose his grossness, his sort of intricacies. There's part of his jaw is rotting. You can see some of his ribs. That all stays there when he is resurrected. But the monster later, at the very end of the film, the big monster, Prometheus, we'll come back to that. He looks horrendous, and not horrendous in a, wow, he's really gross and scary to look at. I literally texted a friend of mine while watching the film and said that he looks like one of those not blow up, but like one of those animatronic plastic guys that you would buy at Spirit Halloween for like $40. He looks so bad, so cheap, doesn't look like a corpse, doesn't like, I can't tell if he's big, so I don't know if they're trying to kind of base it off of the Boris Karloff version. Whatever it is, it's a hot mess. And my partner actually came down and watched the last 5 minutes of the film with me and laughed when he saw that monster, because it's just absolutely, it's trash. It's so bad looking. Like, I don't have any nuanced takes on like why it's bad. It's just that the budget was gone. It was not used on the monster. It was truly sad. My next sort of issues are editing. It's weird. There's the beginning of the film starts with sort of aesthetic shots, and there's this overlay for both Victor and Igor. Like, they'll look at a person or an animal and they'll see their skeletal and muscular systems, and then that's totally dropped. Like, that comes back, I think, one other time and never again. But when you first see it, it feels like it's trying to add this level of quirkiness to an otherwise very generic looking film. It's obviously high budget. I am going to put that out there. Like the cinematography is not bad. The shot composition is not bad. It's just deeply uninspired. The editing is kind of all over the place. And to me, at the end of the day, the sort of throwing in the random quirkiness just kind of felt like unfeeling. Like, it didn't feel genuine. It felt like we need to, one, signify that these two are both really, really smart, and they're really, really smart in the same way. And that's it. That's it. Really just sort of more coding them as geniuses. And that's it. There's not much else. Characters are not characters. Their motives are thin and unrealistic. Lorelai kind of just throws herself into danger for Igor, who at the beginning of the film, it's pretty clear they've never spoken before, but then suddenly he saves her life and she is just all hot for D-Rad. Igor, he just kind of accepts his new life. It is shown in the beginning that his old life was sad. It was a lot of hard labor and no one understood his personal studies. But at the same time, he was able to get books. He was able to read and learn enough to be, as the film calls him, a doctor. He met the woman he would end up with. Like, there's a lot of coding of his life before Victor as being something that's really tragic and he needed to be saved from. But at the same time, it's also kind of not. But he just accepts this new life. He accepts that they're going to be doing these wild experiments. No one really questions, like, there are questions of like, where's the real Igor Straussman? But that only comes up much, much later in the film for like a split second. It's just like, why? Why? Especially after he's straight up assaulted by Victor in the second scene. Why does he just take this new life on? Why can't he just, I don't know, sleep in the room that Victor gave him and then, I don't know, get a job, go to school? I don't know. Who knows? I mean, money. I get that. But it's just, I don't know. I don't understand his motivations other than trying to get lucky with the pretty lady. Turpin and Finnegan are also not characters. They're both just kind of evil villains. Turpin has a motivation of religion, and Finnegan is just the usual big bad queer. Victor, okay. I've talked a little bit about how I'm confused by the coding of Victor. Is he a genius? Is he misguided? Is he the bad guy? Is he manipulative? How are we supposed to feel about him? I don't know. The other thing is his brother Henry. So I'm not going to pretend like Henry isn't a character in the book, but Henry in the book and Victor's brother are different characters. And his brother, both of them actually die in the book anyway, but very differently. The monster murders them. Also, the monster isn't a character. I'll come back to that. There's a lot of pins in things. But we get this backstory that he is rich, but traumatized, which is totally a story that can be told. We do get to see his father for a split second. I am completely blanking on the actor's name, but it's Tywin Lannister for anyone who watched Game of Thrones. He's literally in it for 2 minutes. Another wasted actor. All of the actors in this film are giving it their all, and I kind of wish they hadn't because it was in service of a film that sucks. But we see this trauma from his brother's death, but it's referenced quite literally at the very, very end of the film, and it's assumed that the audience should feel the full weight of all of Victor's previous choices up to now being guided by this loss. And it's just not. It's revealed with a similar tone and presentation as the rest of the film. It's not given the weight that it needs to be this sort of retroactive reasoning for everything Victor has done in the film. And because of that, it just falls flat. A lot of this movie just falls flat. And now, for some nitpicking on my part. I understand that this whole podcast is a little bit pretentious. Frankenstein is my favorite novel, and I'm going to be nitpicky, so help me God. There is a line towards the end where Igor is trying to convince Victor not to go ahead with the final experiment. Not because it's wrong and I just want to say, I don't personally know if I feel like this kind of experiment is wrong, but the novel codes it as such. So I'm going to pretend like that's my hard and fast stance on it. But there's this moment where Igor is trying to convince Victor not to go forward with it. And it's only because Finnegan's going to kill him. That's it. That's the only reason he's trying to stop him. He won't tell him that, but he's going to try and convince him otherwise. So he's yelling at Victor as Victor is, storming down to the laboratory. And he yells, "No one will remember Frankenstein the man, only the monster." I literally choked. I hated that line so much. And I hated it because there's obviously enough understanding of how popular culture misinterprets the book. There's a lot of times where you get a big monster and it's called Frankenstein. And the whole joke is like, people who actually understand the novel know that the doctor is the actual monster. So they know that's like a dialogue around the book in popular culture, but they don't do anything with it. They just throw that line in there, kind of like how they just throw the name Prometheus in there. And it boggles my mind that if they have enough understanding of popular culture, understanding of the novel, Mary Shelley's understanding of the novel with her use of the Prometheus myth, and they just chose not to use that, not to develop those themes, and just make a movie that is on the surface maybe dealing with them, but in reality just kind of not. To me, it's quite lazy writing. It's poor writing. I don't have anything else to really say about that. So, I don't know if you guys could tell, I did not really like this film. But let's move on to my rating scale. So, first rating category is adherence to the book's plot. I gave it a 3 out of 10. It is, connected to Victor's research and literally nothing else from the book. My second category is characters from the book. I gave that a 1 out of 10. There is quite literally only one character who is from the book that is actually in the film. I'm not counting Victor's brother, Henry. I'm just counting Victor. He is the only character that's in the book. Igor doesn't exist. His father is technically a character in the novel, but their relationship is so different in the book versus the film that I'm also just not going to qualify him as the same character. Third category is themes from the book. I gave this a 3 out of 10. They tried to touch on Victor's playing God, but it's immediately dismissed as soon as it's brought up as just being backwards thinking. Victor is seen briefly to be manipulative to Igor, but he's still seen as this mad genius who's inevitably right in his pursuits. Yeah, the themes are attempted at, but very, very muddied, and I don't think there's any conviction behind them. Second to last category, is it enjoyable? I gave this a slightly higher score. I gave it a 5 out of 10 because the first half is just bonkers to watch. Just things are happening where you don't understand why. There's suddenly, assault. There's suddenly hot ladies. There's just crazy stuff happening. So that's really fun to watch. And I laughed through the first half a lot. The second half is so hard to get through. It's tedious, which the same friend that I was texting told me that was a horrific review of a film, that no one wants her film to be called tedious. But what really just drove me insane was it doesn't even have a good enough or a fun enough climax to justify why the first half was so bonkers. Like, it's tonally completely different. It's boring. It doesn't serve any purpose. It's not a fun movie to watch. And my last category, would I recommend it? I didn't even give this like a score. I just wrote no. I don't think anyone should waste their time on this movie. It's 2 hours long, and it's 2 hours I can't get back. With that said, I mentioned earlier that I'm going to watch a film and talk about a film for the next episode that I actually really love. And that is a movie that I've already referenced. It's James Whale's 1931 Frankenstein. I love it. It's from the, Universal era of monster movies. It has Dwight Frye in it, who also plays my favorite version of Renfield in the 1932 Dracula, also Universal. So get excited for that. If you haven't watched that one, I do recommend it. I will still rate it as I have the last two films, but that's what I'm going to be talking about next episode. Not only did Mary Shelley write the first modern science fiction horror novel, she also wrote the first modern apocalypse novel, titled The Last Man. The Last Man was published in 1826. To keep up with me, check out Das Beast Performance Project at Instagram.com. You can also check me out on Patreon. That is under Das Beast Performance. The D, B, and P are all capitalized. Real quick shout out to all my $10 and up patrons. They are Jamari Littlejohn, Carrie Morrison, Lois Gallagher, Susie Wilhoft, and Joella Oldfield. This episode was written by me, Sophie Marie. It was scored and edited by Otto Schatz. Bodybuilding with Victor Frankenstein is distributed by Buzzsprout.com. We are officially listed on Spotify and most of your pod-chasing apps. We will keep you guys updated as those continue. Thank you so much. Have a great and spooky night. Bye.